Good evening and welcome to Chester Springs Library's Spooky Story Time. I'm one of your hostesses, Miss Nancy. Tonight we're going to tell you some stories by Alvin Schwartz. He's dead now, but his publisher gave us permission to do this. And the first story is called So Delicious. Oh, ghost, get out of here. George loved to eat, and every day at lunchtime, he came home from work for lunch. His wife, Mina, was a wonderful cook. And one day on his way home from work, he stopped at a butcher shop and bought a pound of liver. He wanted Mina to cook it for dinner. And while they ate their dinner that night, Mina told him about a rich old lady in town who died. And she was laying in the church beside the house in an open casket for anyone to go and pay their respects. George wasn't interested in that. I have to get back to work, he said. I'll see you for dinner. When George left, Mina started to cook the liver. She put it in a pot and she added herbs and vegetables, and it simmered all afternoon. It smelled so delicious. And when it was done, Mina took a little taste to make sure it was good. It was the best she ever made. It was so delicious. She took another bite, and another bite, and another bite, and soon the liver was all gone. And she thought, oh my gosh, what is George going to say when he comes home? Where am I going to find another liver at this late hour in the afternoon? And then she remembered the old lady laying in the open casket in the church next door. And that night at dinner, George ate liver. And he said, it's so delicious, Mina, have a bite. And she said, oh, George, I had a big snack right before you came home. I spoiled my dinner. So George ate it all, and it was so delicious. And that night, when they went to bed, George was sleeping, and Mina was trying to read, and she heard something. Where's my liver? Who has my liver? What was that? She thought. And then she heard it again. Where's my liver? Who has my liver? She thought, that couldn't be an old lady's voice. And then it was right in her ear. Where's my liver? Who has my liver? And Mina said, I don't have it. He has it. And then scream, ah! And then nothing.
Hello everyone, I'm your other host, Miss Ariel. I have my cloak, I have my witch's hat, and oh no, I lost my necklace. Maybe I'll find it later. But our next story on this rainy evening is called The Girl Who Stood on a Grave. Some boys and girls were at a party one night. There was a graveyard down the street, and they were all talking about how scary it was. Don't ever stand on a graveyard after dark, said one of the boys. The person inside will grab you and pull you under. That's not true, one of the girls said. It's just superstition. I'll give you $1 if you stand on a grave, said the boy. Grave doesn't scare me, said the girl. I'll do it right now." The boy handed the girl his knife. "Plunge this knife into the grave so that we know that you were there." So the girl went down to the graveyard. The graveyard was filled with shadows and was as quiet as death. The girl said there is nothing to be scared of, but she was scared anyways. She picked out a grave and stood on it. Then she bent down and quickly plunged the knife into the ground, and she turned to go, although she couldn't leave. Something was pulling her back. She tried a second time to leave, but she couldn't move. She was filled with terror. "Something has got me," she screamed, and she fell to the ground. When she didn't come back, the others went to look for her. They found her body sprawled on the ground over a grave. Without realizing it, she had plunged the knife into her skirt and pinned herself to the ground. It was only the knife that held her. She had died of fright.
The next story is called Cold as Clay. A farmer had a beautiful daughter he was so fond of, and she fell in love with one of the farmhands. And the farmer was not happy because he thought she was better than the farmhand. So he sent her to live far away in the next county with her uncle. And she went, but she kept thinking about the wonderful life that she was going to have with the farmhand. The farmhand's name was Billy. And Billy, while he was on the farm, wasted away and died. And the farmer felt so terrible. And all the townspeople said Billy died of a broken heart. So the farmer felt very guilty. But he did not call his daughter home. And one night there was a knock on the uncle's door. And the girl answered it. And there was Billy. "What are you doing here?" she said. "Your father told me to bring you home. He gave me his best horse." "Is there something wrong?" asked the girl. "I don't know," said Billy. So she gathered a few things and got on the horse behind him. She wrapped her arms around his waist, and they took off at breakneck speed. Sometime along the way, Billy said, "I have a terrible headache. My head hurts something fierce." She put her hands on his forehead. "You're cold as clay," she said. And she wrapped her handkerchief around his head and tied it. And when they got to her father's farm, she knocked on the door. And when he answered, he said, "What are you doing here?" And she said, "You called for me." And he said, "No, I didn't." And she turned around to see Billy, but he was gone. So her father and the girl went to the barn to see if the horse was there. And the horse was there. He was sweated from running and shivering with fear. And the farmer decided that he should tell Billy's parents the next day. So the parents decided to open the grave. And when they opened the grave, they found Billy's corpse still in it. But the girl's handkerchief was around his head.
So let's read our next story. find my page. Here it is. I can't seem to find it. But ouch! Something bit me. What are you doing in there? You don't belong in there. Get back where you belong. There's my necklace. So, our next story is called The Guests. Here it is, I found it. A young man and his wife were on a trip to visit his mother. Usually, they arrived in time for supper, but they had started out late. It was getting dark, so they decided to find somewhere to stay overnight. Just off the road, they spotted a house in the woods. Maybe they rent rooms, the wife said, so they stopped to ask. An elderly man and woman answered the door. They explained that they do not rent rooms, but they would happy to let them stay with them as guests. They have plenty of room, and they would be glad for the company. The old woman made some coffee and brought out a cake, and they talked for a while. Then the young couple were taken to their room. They again explained that they would like to pay for the room, but the old man said he would not accept any money. The young couple got up early the next morning, and they had left before their hosts had awakened. On a table near the front door before they left a little envelope full of some money to pay for the room. Then they went on to the next town. They stopped at a restaurant to have some breakfast. When they explained to the owner where they had stayed the night, the owner was confused. "That can't be," he said. "That house burned to the ground, and the man and woman who lived in there died in the fire." The young couple could not believe it, so they went back to the house. Only now there was no house, just a burned out shell. They stood staring at the ruins, trying to understand what had happened. Then the woman screamed. In the rubble was a badly burned table, like the one they had seen by the front door. On the table was the envelope they had left that morning.
Now I'm going to read you a poem. This is called the Hearst Song. Don't you ever laugh if a hearse goes by, 'cause you will be the next to die. The undertaker will wrap you up in a great white sheet, from the top of your head to the bottom of your soles of your feet. Then he'll lay you down in a great wooden box, and he'll cover your grave with rocks and dirt. It'll all be fine for about a week, until your coffin begins to leak. And then the worms crawl in, and the worms will take part of you out. The worms will dance and party on your snout. A big worm bug with wobbly eyes will crawl in through your belly button and out through your sides. Your guts will turn a slimy green, and pus will pour out like whipping cream. You'll spread it on a slice of bread, 'cause that's what you eat when you are dead.
This next story I'm about to read comes from a book called Ghost Stories of Chester County and the Brandywine Valley. The author, Charles J. Adams III, gave us permission to read a few pages from his book of nonfiction. you are familiar with our village here in Yellow Springs, you might remember seeing a big yellow building that is next to the library. This is an old building called the Washington Building, and it was originally built in 1750 as a hotel. For many years, it was still in service, and it was still in use up to a couple of years ago as the Yellow Springs Inn. It had attracted many visitors when it was in business, but some of those visitors may not have been entirely alive. One of the previous managers of the inn, named Jeff, he came away with a sighting of one of the spirits of the elegant restaurant in the inn. Jeff's up-close and personal meeting with the ghost took place in the second floor, called the Victorian Room, when he saw in front of the fireplace what he initially believed to have been a dog. That, of course, would have been a bit out of the ordinary, but Jeff could not have imagined just how extraordinary it would all become. As he focused on the object, he saw it was not a dog at all. It was a little boy. It seems that when the boy, dressed in what Jeff remembers as a black coat, noticed Jeff, he panicked. Jeff swore that the boy straightened up from his hunched position by the fireplace and darted toward a wall. Along the way, the boy vanished. Poof! He disappeared. Jeff was stunned. He could not then and cannot now believe that what he saw was real. Yet he knows it was. It was a little boy who disappeared in a flash.
Now I, too, am going to tell you a true ghostly tale from Chester County. And maybe some of you know this, and maybe some of you don't. We have a famous ghost right here in Chester County. His name is Mad Anthony Wayne. According to Wikipedia, he was a soldier, officer, and statesman of Irish descent. He adopted a military career at the beginning of the American Revolutionary War. He served under George Washington. His military exploits were fiery, and his personality quickly earned him a promotion to a brigadier general and the nickname Mad Anthony Wayne. Mad Anthony Wayne was born on New Year's Day in 1745. His most incredible distinction as a ghost is that he has 2 graves, and he's not very fond of either one. I'm going to tell you why. After the Revolutionary War, he became a civilian again, but George Washington called him back to the military life. He sent him to Erie, all the way across the state, to serve. And while Mad Anthony was in Erie, he died. He was buried in Erie, and he stayed there for 13 unlucky years. And then his son Isaac, who was now a young man, decided that his father should come home and be buried in the church of St. David's Episcopal Church in Wayne. So Isaac made the trip to Erie to get his father's bones. But when Isaac got to Erie and they opened the grave, they were amazed that Mad Anthony Wayne's body was in such good shape, except for one leg below the knee that had rotted. Isaac was not prepared to take an entire cadaver home and bury. He was thinking he would bring home bones. So a doctor at the fort had the bright idea to cut the cadaver into pieces and boil it, to render it down so they could scrape off the skin and meat and muscles and give Isaac the bones to take home and bury. Isaac thought this was gruesome. He didn't want to be there when his father was cut up and boiled. And so he waited. And when the deed was done, the doctor took the meat and the muscle and the flesh and put it back in the coffin. And he put Mad Anthony Wayne's uniform in the coffin. And he threw his instruments in the coffin too, because I guess he didn't want to use them anymore. And they buried the coffin. And they took the water that they used to boil the cadaver and poured it all over the grave. And they packed the bones up in Isaac's wagon, and Isaac's went back to Chester County. Unbeknownst to Isaac, along the way, the bones were slipping out of the wagon. And when he got back to where his father was born in Easttown Township, he discovered that he had almost lost half of the bones. But he did not go back and look for any of the bones. He buried his father. And now every New Year's Eve after midnight on Mad Anthony Wayne's birthday, his ghost rises up and travels the road, Route 322, between here and Erie, looking for those bones. Now you can see Mad Anthony Wayne's grave. It's a very humble grave at the St. David's Episcopal Church in Wayne. Or you can see a statue of him on his horse in Valley Forge Park, facing his home in Easttown Township. Or you could go to the Erie Historical Society and look at the cauldron that boiled the cadaver.
And now for our final story. The Ghost with the Bloody Fingers. A businessman arrived at a hotel late one night and asked for a room. The room clerk told him that the hotel was all filled up. There was only one empty room. He said, "But we don't rent that one because it is haunted." "I'll take it," said the businessman. "I don't believe in ghosts." The man went up to the room. He unpacked his things and he went to bed. As soon as he did, a ghost came out of the closet. It was moaning. Its fingers were bleeding, and he moaned, "Bloody fingers, bloody fingers." When the man saw the ghost, he grabbed his things and ran. The next night, a woman arrived very late. Again, all the rooms were taken except for one. You know the one. "I'll sleep there," she said. "I'm not afraid of ghosts." As soon as she got into bed, the ghost came out of the closet. Its fingers were still bleeding, and it was moaning, "Bloody fingers, bloody fingers." And the woman took one look and ran. A week later, another guest arrived very late. He also took the haunted room. After he unpacked, he got out his guitar and he began to play. Soon the ghost appeared. As before, its fingers were bleeding and it was moaning, "Bloody fingers, bloody fingers." The man paid no attention. He just kept on strumming his guitar. But the ghost kept moaning, and its fingers kept bleeding. Finally, the guitar player looked up. "Cool it, man," he said. "Get yourself a Band-Aid." Have a happy Halloween, everyone. Goodbye.